Chapter 13. I changed into Alice's clothes before joining the wider trail. Shoving my leathers into my bag, I doubled back in the wrong direction to discard my silver stash, hoping it might throw the pack off my trail. But if they had followed me that far, they would surely search Pinewood Valley. I hoped the pack wouldn't descend on Alice and Logan's home, that I hadn't inadvertently put them in the line of attack. It was an actual worry. No one got between a wolf and their pack, but there was nothing to be done for it now. Pinewood Valley was just as its name suggested, the little town nestled between two steep hills of evergreen trees. The long, narrow line of houses led up toward Stormcrest foothills, with steep sloping roofs and houses perched on stilts. This town clearly weathered heavy snow in the winters. I squinted up toward the sun setting over the mountain peaks. When I reached the summit towering above, it would be winter still. I paced down the trail into town, the wear of grueling winters evident even in the midst of summer. Wildflowers grew in a blanket down the lane, beautiful shades of red and yellows, making the most of the brief summer months. The shade of the mountain crept across the town as the evening sun fell from the sky. As I ventured into the shade, I felt that strange pull toward the snowy peaks and what lay beyond them. This was the closest I had ever been to my homeland. Beyond the snow-covered ranges of Tagus, Omder waited a ghost kingdom for 20 long years. A few townspeople stopped to give me a quick look before carrying on. In Alice's dress and apron, I seemed like just another traveler passing through. Probably a bar wench or laundry girl moving to the next town for work. The broken fiddle sat at the end of the main road next to a battered stable and paddocks of burnt yellow grass. I entered, and my eyes strained to adjust in the dimness of the windowless room. It wasn't the boisterous banter I expected from a tavern based on the stories Valia told us. No roaring drunks sitting at the bar or clamorous music bouncing off the low ceilings. Rather, a few small groups gathered around tables, their hushed conversations stalling as they looked up at me. "You looking for a meal or a room?" the barman called. He threw a towel over his shoulder and walked to the end of the bar. I warily approached. A few patrons craned their necks to look at me. I felt all their leering stares, wishing I could evaporate into the air. "Both, if possible." I held out the indigo feather to him. "Alice said to give this to you." His eyebrows raised as he looked between me and the feather. He rubbed a hand over his bald head and said, "All right then." Simple as that. I looked at him, unsure of what to do. Is this how all humans treated each other? They wouldn't be so kind if they knew I was a wolf. "What would you like to eat?" he asked, pocketing the feather. What did Velia always say the tavern served? Do you have stew?" The barman chuckled, pointing to the board behind him. "The menu's up there." My cheeks burned as I glanced up at the chalkboard. The tavern in Alicedale only served one thing, and if you didn't want it, you didn't eat. I was woefully underprepared for this journey. How was I going to defeat a sorceress when I couldn't even order food? "Sorry, it's been a long day." I rubbed my forehead. "If you've come all the way from Alice and Logan's, then you must be exhausted," the barman mused. It was probably a big trek for humans, but my body was stronger and faster, even in this form. Yet, I was tired, so I was glad for his empathy in the moment. He turned and grabbed a key off the hook, sliding it across the bar to me. "Go rest. I'll have them send something up. A pretty thing like you shouldn't be around these oafs anyway." My cheeks burned as I dropped my eyes. It was equal parts compliment and warning. "Thank you," I said, picking up the key. I tried to ignore the looks from the patrons as I hastened toward the stairs. They were probably just curious, but my heart hammered as if each one might discover I was a wolf. Nara would pay for my location, Selwyn too, if she knew I existed. The floorboards creaked as I treaded down the shadowed hall. I peered at the number 8 on my key and the corresponding numbers on the doors. The key would probably match the door. At least that bit made sense. One puzzle solved. There still seemed to be so many things that people knew how to do that I'd never been taught. Arriving at the 8th door, a sense of dread made me peek back over my shoulder, but no one was there. I entered the small room and turned the lock, checking it twice before stepping toward the bed. My bag landed on the floor with a thunk, and I collapsed onto the hard mattress, barely taking in the humble dwelling. Days without sleep made me feel boneless and hollow. The nerves and panic finally ebbed, forcing into the back of my weary mind. I needed to rest before I could even begin to process the roiling storm of emotions brewing inside me. Before falling asleep had always been a choice, but now it was a deep-seated need. A light rap on the door made me groan. I didn't want to get back on my feet after hours of trekking, but I forced myself up. Stabbing pains shot through my tired feet. I hobbled to the door and opened it, finding a maid with a tray. "Your food, ma'am," she said, holding out the tray without looking me in the eye. I muttered my thanks, resting the tray on my forearm and relocking the door. Setting the tray of food on her bed, I lay down beside it. The silence pushed in on me, and my body demanded the rest. I only managed to eat a few bites of bread before sleep claimed me. I woke up in a pool of drool, rubbing my hand down my wet cheek. I glanced at the tray of old food. Moonlight filtered in through the window, the pull of the moon rousing me from my stupor. I had barely shifted on the night of the full moon. My wolf still owed the goddess her prayers, and the demand for payment tugged on my soul. Shifting under the full moon was remittance for our gifts. We had strength and speed, incredible senses, and quick healing, but the moon required penance. I moved to the edge of the bed, skirting the tray of abandoned food. I popped a cold roasted potato into my mouth and grimaced. It would have to do. My legs throbbed from the long hike, and the blisters on my toes stung against the cool air. I stumbled toward the windowsill and stared up at the moon. If I shifted, my legs would heal, and I'd be ready for the long journey when the sun rose. I needed fresh air and moonlight more than ever. My wolf was strong. She'd know what to do. I pulled up the window and stared down at the ground below. Wildflowers and brambles covered the back of the tavern, spilling into the forest. I leapt from the window into the bushes, the rush making my stomach drop. The sensation made me miss my favorite oak tree in Alicedale. Briar would have laughed at me to miss a tree, of all things. The rest of the second-floor windows were dark. No one peered out onto the overgrown patch of earth behind the inn where I stood. Rowdy chatter rang out from the front of the building, along with the tunes of a flute and drum. The inn must have come alive while I slept. There seemed little to do in this town at night other than drink and gather with friends. I crept into the tree line, welcoming the darkness. Trekking through the underbrush, I got far enough that the faint lights of the inn faded away, until only the light of the moon guided me. Sniffing the air, I checked one last time that no one was near. All I smelled was damp earth and pine. I sighed, whipping Alice's dress over my head and hanging it on a low branch. My undergarments clung to me with dried sweat. I peeled them off, wrinkling my nose. There were more pairs in the pack. I'd wash these in the next town, since they wouldn't dry in time before I would need to be on the move again. I couldn't wait for things like laundry, though. Making it through the mountain pass was my highest priority. Once I got to Tygus, I could disappear until I was ready to go after Maze and save my sister. The evening air swirled around my cool skin as I stepped into a pool of moonlight. The change racked through me the instant the light touched my skin. I groaned as though stretching a sore muscle, feeling the familiar pop and strain as my spine twisted and I dropped to all fours. My groan morphed into a low snarl as my paws hit the earth. Strength and calm radiated through my limbs. I didn't feel outside the world anymore. I prowled off into the pine forest, a slow walk at first, as I investigated my surroundings, then breaking out into a sprint. I raced up the hillside. The thrill of my pumping muscles and the wind in my fur made all my sorrows feel as distant as the twinkling lights of the village below. I thought about the stale meal in my bed and decided I'd hunt in my wolf form tonight instead. If I had a pack, I could probably take down a stag, but on my own, I'd settle for a hare or squirrel. I just needed to fill my belly and make my sacrifices to the moon. The search didn't take long. The creatures of this forest unused to being hunted. As I licked the blood from my maw, I felt a strange spark within me. My ears twitched, searching for the sound as the rest of me went still. "Calla," a voice whispered. I whirled, but no one was there. The voice echoed in the recesses of my mind. My gut clenched. It was Gray's voice. "How?" I asked. How close was he that he could speak into my mind? As wolves, we used to test it, see how far we could go before the bond would break. The last time I tried with him, it had only been the length of the Alasdale woods before his words grew so faint I couldn't hear them any more. Now I couldn't smell or sense in any other way. Now I couldn't smell or sense him in any other way. Had he followed me this far already? Thank the fucking moon. I could feel the relief in Gray's voice rattle through me. "Are you okay?" "How are you in my mind?" I began trotting back down the hillside, unsettled by this connection. Maybe he'd be able to use it to find me. "You're my mate," Gray rumbled, his claiming words making a thrill run down me even as I ran from them. Our wolves are linked always. My heart sank. Even my wolf wasn't an escape anymore. I couldn't pretend to leave it all behind with Gray still in my head. "Where are you?" he asked. So he didn't know. Good. I raced faster back toward the inn, needing to get rid of him. I couldn't go back. "Don't come after me." "Calla." "Don't," I snapped. "I'm going to fix this on my own. I'm gone." Gray. "Then let me go with you," he pleaded, his voice edging on panic. I leapt over a fallen log, hurtling downhill so fast I nearly stumbled even on my stealthy wolf paws. "No," I said. "You are a prince. You have a duty to your pack. Fuck my pack." I sucked in a breath at his reckless proclamation. No one said that ever. The pack was all that mattered. Individuals died, but the pack lived on. And now Gray and I both were flirting with that dangerous line. "You don't mean that," I said. "I do," he seethed. "I should have said it before. You're my mate, Calla. Nothing else matters without you. If you die, I die. My life is your life. We are one now." The lights of the inn flickered through the dark forest. I was getting close. "You'll drag me back to Highwick." "I'm not my father," Gray gritted out. "I would never do that to you, to anyone." "But he will," I insisted. "He will force your hand, Gray. You can't help me and stay loyal to him. He is your king. He'll kill us both for your disobedience." That was if I hadn't already signed a death sentence already by fleeing myself. I was meant to pledge my loyalty to King Narrow that night, but I ran. If Gray came with me, he'd be picking sides. I'd take away his family, his pack, and ultimately his life. I didn't trust him in the moment, but I also couldn't bear to think of him dead either. 20 years, little fox. His voice filled with barely leashed restraint. I could feel him in every corner of my body, straining to control it. I didn't want the crown, or the glory, or any of it. There's only one thing that ever mattered to me, and now I finally understand why. My chest heaved. I pictured his tortured expression, knowing exactly the crease of his forehead and slope of his eyebrows. Even in my defiance, I wished I could soothe away that torment. But I couldn't go back. Olmdare lay in ruin under the wrath of a sorceress, and Briar lay alone in that tower. I couldn't go back and live out my days as if she wasn't there. I refused to walk by the stairwell that led to her room day in and day out until time and practice made me stop caring that she was there. I wouldn't abandon her like that. I spotted my discarded dress on the tree in front of me. My paw hovered in the air as I debated what to say. Tell him he always mattered to me too? That would only spur him on. But I couldn't lie to him either. Pain laced through me again as I began to shift. "Goodbye, Gray." "No!"